fellow wonders. My name is Willow and I'm always wondering why. I'm sure you are too. I'm here to talk to you about all things true crime. I will discuss a case and hopefully get your thoughts on it. I'm always a curious little one, as I'm sure you are too. Welcome back if you're a loyal follower. I love and appreciate you. I have a crazy story for you guys tonight. The ending will shock and disgust you. It's amazing the ingenuity the human mind can come up with for self-preservation. Disclaimer: the following presentation is for mature audiences. It contains graphic descriptions of crime scenes, adult dialogue, and strong language. Viewer discretion is advised. Dr.John Schneeberger. He was a physician born on the 1st of January 1961 in Laksana, Rhodesia, now called Zambia. Dr. John Schneeberger is from an academic family that values education, and he attended prestigious private schools in South Africa. John was an excellent student and he was liked by everyone who knew him. There's honestly a level of evil that is only unlocked by those charismatic people. It was no surprise when John Schneeberger got admitted into medical school just like his brother. He attended the University of Stellenbosch near Cape Town. Dr. John finally graduated from Stellenbosch in December 1984. He was a diligent student and he was awarded best in his class in anesthesiology. Dr. Schneeberger has two daughters, only a year apart, plus one stepdaughter and one stepson by his now divorced wife, Lisa Dillman. Dr. John was raised in Zambia. He was a dual citizen of South Africa and Canada, where he acquired Canadian citizenship in the year 1993. He married Lisa Dillman in 1991. John's stepchildren were from Lisa's previous marriage. He and Lisa then had their own two children. He had moved to Canada in 1987 and moved to the town of Kipling, Saskatchewan, where he practiced at the Kipling Medical Center after he had completed and acquired certification to practice medicine in Canada in December 1988. John was a family physician and was loved by the residents of Kipling as he was seen as a kind and caring person. He was successful in family medicine, but decided to go further by specializing in obstetrics and gynecology, and completed his academic training in 1992. Kipling is a farming town of 1,100 people in Saskatchewan, and the young and handsome doctor soon became the talk of the town in Kipling. He was one of two physicians in Kipling and was loved by everybody there. He was addressed by his first name, Dr. John. A friend of Dr. John said that his sophisticated manner and charms made him popular with the females. The friend revealed that he was harassed by his female patients to the extent that they pretended just to be sick to see him. Okay. At the time, he was a 38-year-old handsome doctor and headed a community trust fund so the town could build a communal swimming pool. The young doctor also started the sex education module at a local high school. The town was named after author Rudyard Kipling. It is peaceful and everyone knows each other. The town prides itself on being the center of healthcare and education in the region. In Kipling, Halloween is always wonderful and fun-filled for them as youngsters dress up, and there is always a festive vibe as kids are eager to go brave the cold and go out trick-or-treating. The Halloween of October 31st, 1992 would turn into a true nightmare for Candace Fonagy. Candace was a 23-year-old single mother with a high school diploma. She worked at a local gas station. Candace Fonagy was known to be a party person. On this particular day, she was working her usual shift at the local gas station, but her mind was preoccupied with thoughts of her boyfriend who she suspected was cheating on her. Be it the 90s, 80s, 2000s, women and spousal infidelity have always been besties. I just don't get it. Candace and her boyfriend Danny had a massive argument that fateful day because he had asked another girl out. Excuse me? Asked another girl out while dating Candace? Candace was not buying this idea. He had lied to her one too many times. But asking another girl out was just way too much, and it had made her upset. She had kicked Danny's truck, leaving a huge dent on the driver's door. Danny also left Candace's workplace in anger. She was very upset and decided to visit with her friend to ease the rage within her. Candace's friend worked at the Kipling Memorial Union Hospital. I think you see where this is going. When she got there, she found her friend wasn't around, and a nurse who noticed her situation advised her to see a doctor. She took the nurse's advice and decided to see a doctor because she was so bothered by her outburst during her argument with her boyfriend Danny. Dr. John was on call that night and he attended to her. Candace actually knew Dr. John. He had attended to her multiple times before that, and he had delivered her child a few months earlier. So it's unsurprising that she didn't find it difficult to tell him about what had happened between her and Danny. She was not happy about her outburst lately, as she had felt like killing Danny. John had witnessed an argument between her and her boyfriend during a fundraiser for the local swimming pool. He offered to calm her down with a sedative, and Candace, none the wiser, agreed. She had expected the doctor to prescribe drugs for her, but was surprised to see Dr. John approaching her with a syringe. She asked him about this, and he claimed injections would be more effective on her. Candace trusted the doctor, so she agreed to be injected, but immediately after the injection, she felt numb. Her memory from that point was hazy. The substance injected to her was discovered to be Versed. Versed is a medication used before medical procedures or surgery to cause drowsiness, decrease anxiety, and reduce memory of the surgery or procedure, especially for patients who undergo painful surgeries like a colonoscopy. It is used to also help with anesthesia or to sedate people who need a tube or machine-like ventilators to help them in breathing. More importantly, it helps them calming the brain and the nerves. However, after the medication, Candace had a faint memory of Dr. John helping her from the chair into the bed in the consulting room, with her left side facing the wall. A lot of people react to the same substance differently. Candace, even after being injected, was able to recall that my eyes were wide open, and they were like stuck wide open. I couldn't even shut them. I was paralyzed. She recalled that the doctor had unfastened her zip and pulled her pants to the side. She wanted to scream, but the only sound that came out of her mouth were croaking sounds, and the doctor she trusted proceeded to rape her. And he just left her when he was done. Like, ugh, what a doctor. A nurse had come back to check on Candace after some time, but found her laying on the bed because of the strong sedative she was just given. The nurse decided to let Candace spend the night there since she looked tired and was too dizzy to drive herself home. She was still confused and didn't mention what happened. When she woke up, she still had doubts about what had happened, as she couldn't believe that her doctor could do something as evil as that to her. She asked herself a lot of questions like, why would a loving and easygoing man like Dr. John do something so shameful to her? But she had to face reality. Later, she asked the doctor about giving her the sedative. He believed Candace hadn't remembered anything from that night before, so he replied, "Why? Do you want to know? Did it give you a wild dream while smiling? All schmarmy?" At that moment, Candace realized he would never admit to raping her, but she didn't realize how difficult it would be to prove it. She knew if she had wanted justice, she had to take action immediately. Despite being still traumatized from the incident and just recovering from the strong sedative given to her, she went home and removed her underwear to see a semen stain. She took her panties off and put them in a plastic bag and sealed it, as it was her only evidence. She initially wanted to report the case to the Kipling police station, but she knew the charismatic doctor could have friends there who could easily cover it up for him. So she went to the city of Regina, which was a 2-hour drive from Kipling. There she went to a rape clinic for testing. That test confirmed that the substance on her underwear was sperm. It was also found on the jeans she wore that day, including on her vagina swabs. The hospital contacted Regina police for Candace's case. Candace confirmed she had not had sex for weeks leading up to the incident. DNA testing was a science developed in the 1990s. The first criminal to be convicted by DNA evidence in Canada was a rapist who was a resident of Ottawa. The case occurred in 1989, 3 years before Candace's case. The Kipling police station was informed of Candace's allegations against Dr. John, and they decided to investigate the situation. Dr. John was a prime suspect, as there were only 2 men in the hospital that night. Dr. John and a man who stayed with his wife all through her labor, and he never left her side that night. All evidence pointed at Dr. John. He was questioned on the situation and insisted that she was hysterical when she arrived during the Halloween period, and he had to give her a sedative to calm her down, which sometimes caused hallucinations of a sexual activity as a side effect. He volunteered to offer a blood sample for DNA testing. The genetic materials obtained from Candace and Dr. John didn't match, which caused so much confusion in the situation. The test was done in the year 1992. The second test was carried out in the year 1993, a year after the first test, but this time the test would be monitored by the police. Despite this, the DNA did not match that found in Candace's rape kit, causing the police to close the investigation in the year 1994, 6 months after the test was conducted. Many of the locals did not believe Candace and considered her a liar whose plan was to damage the image of their beloved Dr. John, the charming medical professional that had helped in raising funds to a public swimming pool, a well-to-do man with 4 kids who was happily married, a man who was willing to go for multiple tests even after the allegations laid against him. What a wonderful man the people of Kipling must have thought John to be. The unmatching DNA samples further convinced the people of the town that Candace was a liar. They had believed she had a crush on him, and that whole accusation was to get back at him for rejecting her. Others believed it to be a consensual affair between the two, but that Candace was trying to use the situation to make money, because if indeed she had been raped, why hadn't she called the attention of the nurses after she woke up during this period? Dr. John's wife, Lisa, never doubted her husband. No one wanted to believe a single mother who went out drinking and partying and had a social life. She was ostracized by the society and became an outcast. A horrible experience, but she never gave up. She kept fighting for justice, for the truth to prevail, and also to prevent Dr. John from ever having another victim. She then decided to employ a private detective to obtain a sample of Dr. John's DNA and test it at a private lab. Larry O'Brien was the private investigator she hired. He had retired from the RCMP after 25 years and became a private investigator. He believed Candace was telling the truth, but did not understand why the DNA test said otherwise. To him, it only meant one thing: the results had been tampered with. But who could have done that, and how was it done? Larry O'Brien set out to find this out. Candace knew that Dr. John, being a medical doctor, could have manipulated the DNA tests. The detective sent his assistant to Dr. John under the facade of working for a radio station. The assistant convinced Dr. John to engage in a fake competition and placed his entry in an envelope. The doctor used his saliva to seal the envelope, was to serve as DNA evidence for their investigation, but this didn't work out well. Larry O'Brien had explained that somehow or other the envelope was contaminated, but it was randomly selected from a new box, so it should not have been contaminated. I'm never licking an envelope ever again. He had to devise another means to achieve his aim. So when he saw the doctor leaving his car, he broke in. He found strands of his hair on the headrest of the driver's seat and his chapstick in the ashtray. Candace was already running out of money and had to borrow money from her parents to pay an independent lab to run a DNA test. Unfortunately, the hair didn't have any roots, so it couldn't be tested. The chapstick would turn out to be what they needed. The DNA on that chapstick matched that of the semen on Candace's underwear. Another test had to be carried out because the evidence brought by Candace and her private investigator was inadmissible in court. This was because there was no proof that Dr. John was the one who had used the chapstick, and her private investigator had broken into Dr. John's car to obtain the evidence. The doctor was then asked for another DNA sample. This was to be monitored by the police and was the third blood sample that would be taken. The doctor had accepted for his samples to be taken, although he was furious and offended. But he had to do it because of his career and his reputation. This time, the technician requested to take blood from his fingers, which Dr. John refused, and the technician finally accepted to draw blood from his arm, since this was not in the court order. She found it difficult to draw blood from his vein, even though it was swollen, and the blood this time around was not enough and had a dark brown color like old blood. All this looked really strange to the technician, but there was no perfect explanation for this. While they drew his blood, the doctor had rolled up his sleeve and the technician had pricked the needle into his arm, but Dr. John intervened, took the needle from the technician, and completed the job. The RCMP stood closer during the procedure to have a better view of what was going on. The police had asked about an injury on the upper arm, on which Dr. John claimed was an injury that occurred from the previous drawing of his blood from his arm. He claimed that this had led to an injury to his tendon. The police officer was satisfied with his explanation, which sounded like a plausible one. After the sample was gotten, the blood was inadequate for testing due to the poor quality. This rendered the case useless, but questions kept on coming, like why the DNA sample from his chapstick matched the sample from his sperm on Candace's underwear, but not match the sample from his blood. No one could answer this question, and the case was a mystery to everyone after the third DNA testing was done with no improvement over the case. Candace was furious, saying, "Why did they accept the blood if they knew something was wrong? Why didn't they take another sample while the doctor was still in the laboratory?" She was no longer welcome in Kipling, as people gave her hateful stares and rumors were going around about her. No one believed her except for her parents. She left Kipling with her child to Regina. Life continued back in Kipling as nothing had ever happened. Dr. John became a Canadian citizenship and retained his citizenship in South Africa, where he was born. He had gotten his Canadian citizenship just 1 week after the second DNA test was carried out. When Candace had hired a private investigator, Lisa had found out from a cleaner who knew Candace's parents. She had been furious to hear this, as she thought the incident was in the past and everything was going to be just like it used to be for her family. 1 week after Lisa had heard about the news of the PI, Candace's parents were sent a letter saying they were no longer welcome in the Kipling Memorial Union Hospital. Like, you can't come to the hospital. This is Canada. You can't ban somebody from a hospital, especially the only one. Even with the way things were going, Candace stood her ground and fought for justice. Indeed, Candace should be given an award for her strength and ability to stand her ground. Just by the way, maybe she should have applied this same tenacity to get away from her joke of a boyfriend. She filed a lawsuit against Dr. John, and this time she reported him to the local medical society. Nothing came out of it, and she had to accept that Dr. John had gotten away with his crime. Dr. John's wife, Lisa, was vocal about her thoughts on Candace and had called her a gold digger and a slut in an interview on a local TV station. However, the tables turned when Lisa found out that her husband had been injecting her 15-year-old daughter from her previous marriage with a substance. She only found out because her daughter had found a condom wrapper in her bed. The teenager had brought this to the notice of her mother. This wasn't the first time hearing that her husband had injected her daughter in the middle of the night. Lisa had recalled that the little girl had woken up with tears and groggy eyes once, and when her mother asked what was wrong, she had said her father had injected her with a substance that night. Lisa had asked her husband why he had given her an injection. He replied he heard her coughing and gave her something that would help her. Though Lisa didn't hear her daughter cough that night, she had trusted her husband to know best. He was a doctor after all. This wasn't great news for Lisa in any way, though it wasn't a big deal that John had injected her daughter, as he was a doctor and would have his reasons. But finding a condom in her room was definitely very suspicious. Lisa later found out that John had begun abusing her daughter 2 years ago when she was 13 years old. She went to her husband's home office and found condoms, syringes, Versed, and other sedatives. Lisa felt her world crumble, and she wished she had believed Candace 7 years ago. If she had, her daughter's abuse never would have started. Lisa reported to the police after she kicked John out of the house. When Candace heard the news, it brought her sadness. She had fought so hard so that no one else would become a victim of the doctor. Even though she got her vindication, the very thing she had tried to prevent had ended up happening to his own stepdaughter, and who knows who else. The police took John's blood samples. This time, blood was taken from his finger. It was about time they did something right. They also took his hair and his saliva, and the DNA test results came out. They matched the DNA from the sperm on Candace's underwear and the saliva found on the chapstick of the doctor. John was arrested and charged for the sexual assault of Candace Fonagy and his stepdaughter. The trial of the doctor started in 1999, and even during his trial, he denied the accusations laid against him, saying that Fonagy had broken into his home and taken a used condom from the trash can to contaminate her underwear and jeans. He claimed that Candace had done this to blackmail him for money. He said that's what led to him taking drastic measures by manipulating his DNA to protect himself and his family. He was questioned about how he got to manipulate his DNA. His DNA manipulation was both surprising and confusing for everyone. He revealed that when he was asked for a blood sample in the year 1992, he was desperate at that point, and he had inserted a 15-centimeter Penrose drain along his arm, running along the actual vein, and filled the tube up with another man's blood and anticoagulants. During the test, he had tricked the lab technician into taking the test where the tube was planted. Can you imagine doing that to yourself? He was so sure of himself, he never used a condom on Candace, leaving you to wonder if there was other women or maybe even kids of his own running around. Dr. John had gone through this process when a blood sample was requested from him, and he had removed the tube afterward, but he had to put it in for the second test 9 months after the first test. The blood had a dark brown color by that time, showing it was old because he had kept the blood for 7 months after he heard that Candace hired a private investigator in April 1996. The blood he inserted into his arm belonged to one of his male patients named Danny Sabo. Danny would have been the one arrested for the rape of Candace if a test was carried out among the males in Kipling. I don't understand why he would not have called Danny in for fresh tests, making up some kind of reason. But I guess he didn't think that far ahead. Justice seemed to prevail 7 years after the crime was committed, and Dr. John was charged with sexual assault, administering a noxious substance, and the obstruction of justice. Though Dr. John wasn't convicted for sexual assault against his stepdaughter because there wasn't enough conclusive evidence against him. Candace was finally vindicated and everything was brought to light before everyone after 7 good years. For Lisa, things weren't easy, and her youngest child was just 13 months, but she received help from her family and was able to secure a job from the Diabetes Association in Red Deer, Alberta. She was not pleased when the court allowed Dr. John to see his children and had refused to allow the children to spend the night with him. The night before he was finally jailed, which had attracted a fine of $200, Lisa was scared that after he had served his jail term, he would have access to the children. So she took a great step by reporting him to the immigration authorities about his Canadian citizenship. His Canadian citizenship was withdrawn after they found out that he had secured the citizenship while he was under investigation for the rape of Candace. Though he was cleared at the time, he had still been part of an investigation. Lisa had done this because she knew that once John was done serving his jail term, he was going to fight for his parents' rights, since the crime was committed against his stepdaughter and not his biological children. However, John did not serve a 6-year jail term. He was released 4 years later. He was arrested. He was released on parole in the year 2003. Some people were still in support of Dr. John and petitioned immigration authorities to reconsider the deportation order so he could see the children, but this was denied. Like, what is wrong with people like this? I know you want to believe in the good of people, at least I do, but I would never want the victim of a sexual assault to go spend the night with her abuser. John was deported back to his hometown in South Africa and finally went to live in Durban, where he lived with his mother. John was stripped of his medical license, but his brother Bill, who was a cardiologist, became his biggest advocate to get him into the medical field, but this was not successful. John now works in the catering industry back in Durban and has retraced his steps, asking for forgiveness. He has also become a religious man. Candace Fonagy is happily married and works as a care assistant at an addiction care facility in Saskatchewan. Lisa still feels her ex-husband is not remorseful for his actions, while her daughter has put the past behind her with the help of her mother. Almost a decade, it was worth it, and Candace is certainly proud of the decision she made. It is sad that a lot of people have fallen victim to this man, but may not be aware because of the sedative given to them. But for sure, he has been stripped of his medical license and would never have patients who will become his victim again. Candace Fonagy is a true hero here. Her tenacity is unmatched. Her and her family took a massive bullying by the town of Kipling when she went forward. They should be ashamed. Lucky she didn't back down. Many would have. I'm personally blown away by his fooling the DNA test for so long. And he came up with such a creative way to fool the test. I hope the insertion hurt like hell, SOB. So I have 2 questions for you tonight. Do you think that Dr. John had more victims? And do you think the town was too quick to jump on Candace because of her history of being called a party girl? Please leave your answers below. I am dying to know what you think, and then I will share what I think and why. Good night, my little wonders. Never stop wondering or asking why. I refuse to. I try to do cases that fascinate me in some way or another. Subscribe, like, and share so I can keep telling you these cases. Love you all.